Hey everybody, today I'm going to show you how to use the questions section of the keyword briefs in Content Harmony. We're doing a couple cool things here. This is a keyword brief for a keyword of when to replace brake pads for an automotive type of website. And you can see we've got questions coming in from a few different sources. One of them is Google People Also Ask sections. So if you go into the search result and you look at what we call PAAs, they show up right here. According to, I think, research from Moz I saw earlier this year, they were showing up in something like 80% of keywords. Google is really pushing these into search results. And while I think they'll pull back on that someday, right now there's just a lot of information here on how Google understands the topic and potentially things that people might want answered when they're searching for this query. Now, there's some noise too. It's not always perfect, but it's definitely a good bet that if you're doing evergreen content that's going to be useful in a couple of years and you're really going after SEO for that particular piece of content, questions are something that you should be figuring out how to work either into the document outline or into an FAQ section or some other way. So we're also doing things like pulling in top Quora threads for that particular topic and top Yahoo Answers threads for that topic as well. So it's easy to kind of make fun of Yahoo Answers, but we've found that there's actually some decent threads. And for the purposes of brainstorming what people are talking about this topic, just looking at questions that show up on Yahoo Answers is a great database of sources for these type of topics that have been around for a while. So here's how I'd be using this inside of an actual project. With when to replace brake pads, that's pretty evergreen, long-form content. You should potentially be building these questions in as an H2 and then a paragraph. And a really good format to use would be actually making the question an H2 tag. So what thickness of brake pads need to be replaced? And then coming through and just answering it directly in the first sentence. This is also a good way to optimize for featured snippets and saying brake pads should be typically replaced when approximately 1/8 of an inch to 3/16 of an inch of friction material remains of the steel backing plate. So that's the tire rack version, and whether or not they intentionally optimize that for featured snippets and for a question and answer format, they've done a great job of structuring the syntax of that question. So if you're going big on content where it's really important to include the exact question and answer, and featured snippets are a big opportunity, I would be teaching my writers that that is a good direct way to do the question. Make the question a heading, answer the question in the first sentence, and then include as much in the rest of the paragraph or other paragraphs, or even clarifying graphics after that, as would help the user understand the answer to their question. So here's another content type. We've got a couple of affiliate types of keywords here. And let's look at best protein powder, because that's something where somebody's in a new diet or a fitness regimen, they just went keto or whatever, and they're trying to figure out all of this very sciencey nutrition type of stuff surrounding protein powders. So in this case, I'd be looking at the Google PAAs as kind of the high level, what are big questions that the user's trying to answer? What is the best protein powder to buy? Which is the healthiest protein powder? Now here's a more specific one. Which whey protein is best for muscle building? Now that's people that are going after a specific type of fitness regimen, but it's not going to be as broad as something like this. But then I'd be looking at this and saying, well, what is the best protein powder to buy? What are your goals? Are you trying to build muscle? Are you trying to go full keto and lose some weight? Or is this part of your lifestyle? Is this a temporary thing? Like, what's your goal behind drinking these powder supplements or whatever it is? So which powder is best for weight loss kind of goes along with that. So I'd be using that to do two things. One, it's informing my document outline. Like, I need to answer different goals of people and maybe send them over to another piece of content that's more specific for their question. So which protein powder is best for weight loss? Which protein powder is best for runners? Which protein powder is best for muscle building? All three of those might be separate pieces of content on top of just best protein powders. So that could be an entire content cluster. When we get into things like Quora threads, those are good for, one, brainstorming related questions that you should be answering, but also actually looking and seeing what experts actually say. Your writer can even use these as potential places to quote. So what is the best protein powder for women? Maybe we open up that Quora thread. And let's see what they have to say. because we could find that there's a fitness expert for women in here that says, you know, these 3 things are different about women's metabolism, and so you should consider these factors when choosing a protein powder that's different than what men might use or something like that. I don't know enough about protein powder to say for sure, but if your writers don't have an expert on site, this is a great alternative to maybe interviewing an actual expert. So here's the the chosen answers that are showing up. This isn't exactly the best Quora thread result, I don't think, although there is one great thing in here, which is a whole bunch of different related keyword options that you can use from Quora as well. Now here's one: Mike Thomas, co-owner of this site, possibly an expert on the topic. We don't know. We can always research. Maybe I'm not seeing anyone here. If I saw somebody that was a nutrition professor from a university that was respected by my audience or something, that might be a good person to quote. So there's a bunch of different ways that you could use those types of Quora threads, both to brainstorm other ideas, find experts on a topic, whatever it is. Yahoo Answers are the same thing. Mostly we use that as just a third source for questions. I wouldn't go to Yahoo Answers and think that's where I'm going to find experts on a topic. The reputation of Yahoo Answers is not as good as Quora in regards to finding experts on a topic, but it's a decent idea of finding other questions that you might want to answer. So I would go back and take all of these into my brief tab, and I'd come down to this section right here. What key questions do readers have that needed to be answered? There's a couple of ways you can do this. You can say, take a look at the 4 PAAs. We need to answer all of those questions in here. And so you can, actually go in to the tab of your report and show the writer what are those for. You can say, we definitely need to answer these 3 high-level questions. I will let you decide how to put it into the document outline, or here's how you should integrate it into the document outline. That all depends on what kind of relationship you have with the writer for that content. But really, we've got a section here that says, this user typed something in. They're looking for some type of answer or recommendation. What do we want to tell them? We do have a separate section in the brief for what is our brand point of view on this topic. That might also be a good place to weigh in on, there's 5 different good answers for this topic, but here's how our brand approaches the topic. So use that in conjunction with the questions. Something like how long to cook chicken. What we want to highlight here is that there's 5,000 different ways to ask that question. How long does it take to cook raw chicken? How long does it take to cook chicken per kilogram? How long does it take to cook a 1,600 gram chicken? Which I have no clue if that's a small or large chicken, but skipping over that for a second, the point is there's a billion ways to ask the question, and so we need to figure out a smart way to build that document outline to answer those high-level ones. A homework or animal website here, what sound does a zebra make? Similar types of stuff. Let's look at a B2B example. So I've got some examples of maybe a B2B review website keyword here. And so let's take a look at something like Salesforce versus HubSpot. So that's a search volume around 1,300. There's at least 1,000 people a month doing those comparison types of searches. Now, we're getting away from some kind of evergreen blog content here, and we're getting into a high-level kind of conversion-driven keyword. Whoever ranks for this, they're probably driving some strong intent-driven, purchase-driven traffic over to some review pages, and I'm guessing they've got affiliate relationships set up to take advantage of that traffic. So if you think of websites like G2.com and Capterra.com, Business.com, those types of websites are the kind that you'd see ranking for these sorts of software reviews or comparison terms. So get that loaded. We've got another one here that's another evergreen topic, how to build a deck. While we wait for the other report to load on my slow internet connection today, let's take a look at that. These are ones that I would build right into a document. Do I need a permit to build a deck? Can I build a deck directly on the ground? How far apart should deck joists be? You could build out a good half of the article just based upon questions like this. Okay, so here we go. Salesforce versus HubSpot. Very research and transactional driven keyword intent, exactly what we would expect. And so we've got questions like, what is the difference between Salesforce and HubSpot? That's probably a good first H2 in your document. Let's start off with what's the difference, because there are some, right? Does HubSpot use Salesforce? Well, they have integrations, so we should probably talk about the integrations and how someone might use that, because you could purchase software from both companies. Who's HubSpot's competitors? Is HubSpot's CRM any good? So we start getting into individual product comparisons. And then the Quora threads, again, are a good research point to see what people in the public think I'd also want to be checking the actual landing pages for the sites and comparing those in a piece of content like this. And then I'd probably be pulling in UGC content from users that have answered whether they preferred HubSpot or Salesforce for their situation or something like that. So in almost all cases, it's worth pulling some of this content in. One good last tip, if you're working on something like local landing pages or e-commerce category pages, FAQs are a really awesome way to put unique content on an e-commerce category page. They're helpful to the user. They're not just, crappy filler content that you put on e-commerce category pages to rank. And so if you have an e-commerce page for something like, kitchen mixers, and you go through and look up the top 4 to 8 questions about kitchen mixers and put that on your category page, that's huge. That's an awesome piece of content. That's the type of stuff that can launch your e-commerce category page from page 2 to the top of page 1 in a space that, content is a big differentiator on that type of content, that type of landing page. So I hope that gives you a few ideas for how to use content. I can think of hundreds of other situations where I'd be working Q&A formats into my content. If you have any questions or if you spot an example where you're not quite sure of how to use it in a piece of content, just drop into Intercom chat, click on the new conversation with me, and I'm happy to kind of take a look at your report and the keyword you're going after and help you brainstorm some ways to use that. So thanks.